Looks like they are going for two and the win. A flip to the running back. Can he get to the pylon? Yes, he can. You are listening to the Going for Two Live Podcast Network. Going for two, because no one remembers the extra point.
What is going on, guys, and welcome to the Empire League podcast. I am your host, of course, Jeff Lambert. You can follow me on Twitter at JeffLambert77. Of course, we are here tonight to break down your league. We're going to rank. We've already ranked your teams from 12 to 1, and we're going to count them down on the podcast tonight. But before we get to that, let's go ahead and meet the panel that we have tonight. First up, we got Kyle Senra down there in the corner over there, host of the Press Coverage Podcast, and he's also the host of the 2-point conversion on Monday nights during the season. You could follow him on Twitter at Senra Says. What's up, Kyle?
And don't forget the Dynasty Gambit, which we just recorded last night. Yeah, love talking Dynasty. Love doing these PLPs. I love salary cap and contract leagues too. So this is an especially great treat. So thank you, Empire League, for purchasing the PLP.
Absolutely. I was hoping you would be on this one, Kyle, because you definitely are the expert on those contract leagues for sure. Up next, we got Brian Ford. He's a co-host of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 and also Dynasty Fever podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at FFJunkie_. What's up, Brian?
Hey, how's it going? Everybody here on the screen and the league watching at home. Really, I love doing these. It's exciting. I am not an expert on contract leagues, so apologies. I won't be taking a lot of that into account when I, tell you my analysis because it's really confusing.
Good stuff. All right, next up, we have Shane Barrett, host of the Red Zone Redemption podcast, contributor for RotoHeat.com, and creator of the Polly's Playoffs Charity League. You can follow him at FFShaneB. What's up, Shane?
What's up, Jeff? I love these PLPs. I don't know why you still let me do them because I just like to talk trash to people, but I love you, love these PLPs, and I'm ready to rip some people a new one.
Good stuff. Yeah, we got to have a good mix. Got to have the ones, the analyticals. We got to have a couple assholes on the show as well, and you fit that category.
Amen.
All right, and last but not least, Mr. Eric Romoff. He's the creator of Green Screens Media and also contributes for DrRoto.com, and he's the co-founder of Pros with Joe's Charity League. You can follow him at Fantasy Nab. What's up, Eric? Eric, can you hear me? All right. Yeah.
Apparently not.
Had some issues there. That's all right. All right.
He was just like in New Hope. He's the first rebel soldier shot by the stormtroopers. We're going with the Empire theme here.
Exactly. Wish I had some Empire music to play right about now. All right. So this is how this works, guys. We're going to count down your teams. We ranked them. All of us created a consensus ranking basically by using all of our ranks. And we ranked them by the order we would take them over, not necessarily best to worst or, worst fantasy team. So if you have a team that, may have a ton of draft picks, but may not be that good, one of us may actually like that idea. So we would rank your team a little bit higher than normal. We take the dynasty account into effect as well. So we're not just basing it on 2023. So if you've got a young team that may not compete this year, that could compete in future years, we could definitely, we'll definitely rank that into account as well. Let's go ahead and just jump right out here into the number 12 spot.
Number 12.
Number 12 team was a consensus number 12. We all had this team at number 12. And it is the less picks, the better. And Shane, this is your squad here. Go ahead and kick us off.
Oh, I don't even know how to start with the just absolute ribbing I'm about to give this person. But I think we discovered that your name was Brandon. Brandon, I don't know if you can see this. Do you know what this is? It's a championship ring. You're never going to know what that looks like because your team's so bad. Okay? So I hate your quarterbacks. I do not like Kenny Pickett whatsoever. I think he's overrated. And Trey Lance is inexperienced and coming off a major injury. I don't trust him, and that the Niners seem to be leaning Brock Purdy, which even if you're a Trey Lance truther, doesn't make sense to me. Your running backs are even worse than that. They're hot garbage. And the worst part for you, Brandon, I'm so sorry, is you don't have picks to make your running backs any better. It's terrifying. You're living up to the less picks, the better, which that's probably the best part of your team is your team name. Your wide receivers are a bunch of wide receiver threes on their NFL team and Mike Williams. And you still don't have any picks to make them better. How did you end up with 0 picks? That's what I want to know. My only advice to you is try and trade Trey Lance to someone who still believes in him. And I would even consider trading Kyle Pitts at this point. You need to go into a heavy, heavy rebuild mode. And sometimes that means giving up your best players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this team, I tried really hard to find some things positive to say about this team, and I couldn't find a ton that, they do have a late first, it looks like, 2023. Am I reading that correctly there?
Why?
But yeah.
No, I see I didn't see it in order. I saw the early 23 second, but still late 23 first, early second, early third isn't going to make this team that much better.
Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on this team? Any positives that y'all can find about this team that y'all can look going forward?
I mean, I was going to talk about like moves to make. It seems like Jordan Love, like that's a decision to make on whether to extend Jordan Love or not. Yeah. Based on like what I was reading with the league constitutions, like Jordan Love's contract's pretty cheap right now. I was looking at the spreadsheet, $12, I guess, like for last season. So like the increase wouldn't be much, still probably looking around $20. Like that seems like a no-brainer just because the quarterback room is so empty and there's bodies there, but they're like, at least having Pickett and Love gives Brandon 2 starters. So I think at the very least a Jordan Love extension probably makes sense. Even if we're still projecting Aaron Rodgers to leave. Apparently Aaron Rodgers was traded for a third too. Billy chimed in the chat to mention that. So I guess we can talk about that whenever we get to those teams. But I think Jordan Love extension is probably the one move that Brandon can make right away that, isn't obviously there's trades to make. Like I like your idea, Shane, of, trading Kyle Pitts because he does hold so much value. You can break that up into several pieces and, kickstart the rebuild that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking at his quarterbacks, I don't know if he drafted all these guys or not, but you are a terrible judge of talent. Well, these are all young quarterbacks, and they all ended up being not so great.
If you look at the master spreadsheet, I think it says he traded for all of them. So we're talking about why he doesn't have picks. I think it's because he built this quarterback room through trade. I think he even traded for Kyle Pitts as well. So
wow. Yeah,
keep making trades, I guess. It's the only way. Because I know Dynasty Outhouse from the Dynasty the Trade Addicts podcast talked about this. If you make a bad trade, the only way to fix it is to just keep trading and trade your way out, and eventually you'll be back into the positive, right? So just keep on trading. It seems like this team likes to trade. So
absolutely. All right, let's go ahead and get to number 11.
Number 11.
All right, number 11's team ranked as high as number 8, as low as number 11. And Brian, this is your team, and the team is God damn it.
Yeah, I would say that if this was my team too. So when I go in the spreadsheet and I start to figure out how I like each team, I kind of go like, oof, meh, good, And then sometimes when I get to like the right side of the spreadsheet, the oofs there make some of the early oofs look a little better and turn into mehs. And this was one of those that made some of the early oofs look a little better. So you've got a really bad quarterback group for Superflex. Your best quarterback, Geno, is a quarterback 2. Your best tight end and a tight end premium is a tight end 2, Dalton Schultz. You have very few tradable pieces. For as bad as this is, I'd want to see more quality draft capital like you'd think, but that's not there either. So I like that you don't have a lot invested into running back because this is going to take a while and it's not a good place to invest. But you do have a couple tradable running backs, which we'll get to in a second. Your wide receivers aren't bad either. They would be also a source of things to trade. So for me, the plan for you is basically a reboot. So you're going to try to turn pieces into multiple pieces, including try to get as much picks as possible because they're fluid, they gain value, they don't get hurt, and when they're on the clock, they become very valuable. And this is not about when people trade elite pieces into depth and they actually hurt their team. This is about you expanding the number of bullets you have, so to speak, right? You want to turn as a piece into multiple pieces as much as you can. Make 1 for 2s, 2 for 3s, get more back than you're giving. You want to acquire 24 firsts and seconds whenever possible. I want you to trade Geno because, listen, he has this year with Seattle. We don't know if they're drafting, I don't know, Richardson, Hooker, whatever, right? And maybe he's got one more year left. He had one late bloomer year of real quality. So really, by the time you're competitive, who knows what Geno's going to be? Get him off your roster. Get the points off your roster. I want you to trade Chubb, right? There's no need to have a 27-year-old running back on this team. Trade him. Trade any wide receivers that you can except for Lamb. But eventually, if you do have to trade Lamb, trade him too. Trade Schultz. Try to get a quarterback in the 2023 rookie draft or trade for dips in value on other quarterbacks. I'm thinking Lance. I'm thinking Tua. I'm thinking Kyler Murray. They're cheap now relative to what they should be. They're being undervalued. Those would be quarterbacks to target, and they're not old either. So by the time you're competitive, maybe they're still in their prime. In your 2023 rookie draft, besides trying to get a quarterback, what I want you to try to do is remember that you're drafting for assets. You're not drafting for your team, right? You're not drafting for your roster unless you take JSN with that mid first, right? So what you want to do is be open to trading picks when you're on the clock to people who want players who are on the board. You want to seek value. You want to get extra picks. You want to get 24s for people trading into your spots and just keep expanding those number of bullets that you have. And eventually, you're probably not going to compete in 24. I don't know too much about the contracts in this league, so you're probably looking at 2025 by the time you're competing. And so that's would be what I would recommend for this team. Yeah.
Just to question Brian on your recommendation of trading Geno, do you think that's imperative to do before the NFL draft? I mean, I guess we got like a week left, right? So like basically you're saying Joe, who I noticed, I think Joe, that's the guy who made the comment. God damn it! I think you got a busy week to try and shop Geno this week, right?
Yeah, I think it's prudent to do it before the draft because he may get hurt by the draft, but all his teammates, all his league mates are listening now. So right, they all know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
I noticed, just looking at the spreadsheet, CeeDee Lamb has 0 years left on the contract. It looks like up for the holdout portion of the contract, or like at the end of his contract. So I noticed Joe's financial situation that he's over the cap right now. So I think the first quick thing too is cutting some players. And if I do love that whoever commissioned this made it really easy for us to give us, okay, this is what they're cut. This is the amount you save by cutting the player. But just looking, Kareem Hunt and Kenny Golladay, that's 2 cuts that suddenly put him under the cap, and then trying to figure out how to save enough money to extend CeeDee Lamb, probably because as you mentioned, Brian, the cap is fake. Okay, never mind.
I love it.
All right then. Well,
That's
then you're not too worried. But yeah, even cutting. I believe cutting Kareem Hunt, cutting Golladay, that the amount you save from that's enough for CeeDee Lamb's extension.
Yeah, I mean we've got guys that shouldn't even be rostered. Galladay,
Jake Fromm,
Matt Ryan. Kareem Hunt is borderline at this point. Jerick McKinnon is borderline at this point. Zach Moss is borderline. Travis Homer's borderline. Like if nobody's going to give you a third or a fourth for those guys, yeet them. Gonskis.
Yeah, get rid of them. Absolutely. Yeah, just to go to Kyle's point on that spreadsheet, that thing is a thing of beauty. It gives me anxiety thinking about having to be the one to update it all the time, but it's definitely laid out very nicely. So whoever did that, props to you, because that's pretty awesome.
It gives me anxiety thinking about playing in the league. Like if I had a league, I'm in over 30 leagues, right? If I had leagues that had this complexity to it, I couldn't play in that many leagues. Like my head would explode.
Yeah, agreed. And in case you noticed, my background's a little messed up. I had to change cameras. My brand new camera that I just purchased is causing me to be laggy, so I had to go back to my built-in Mac camera. So it's not quite as good as my Brio, but we'll make it work. Shane, I want to get your thoughts though, because you of all of us had him at number 8. So I'm curious to what you saw that you liked about this team.
Yeah, I I'm a whore for running backs. I'm not going to lie to you. So seeing Chubb, I'm not even an Akers fan, but I do think he still has some value to be held. And then Michael Carter really stood out to me because Breece Hall should miss probably half the season recovering from the injury. And so that's what probably, and CeeDee Lamb too, like those are probably the guys that stood out to me. 8, looking at it, seems a little high now. But I don't know. That's probably what stuck out to me. Good Lord, I can't talk. Yeah. But you know, I should put this guy at 13 because he still has Jake Fromm on his roster. So,
and I think what Shane's bringing up is a couple of things that I forgot to mention is there are guys who are on this roster who it's probably worth waiting to in season to trade, like Jerome Ford. What can you get for him now? Probably not much. You might as well hold because if he makes it alive out of the draft, he could have a role in the Browns backfield with Hunt gone. Michael Carter, same thing. If he's playing in Breece's absence and scoring points, he's worth more than he is now. So you got to be strategic about what you trade now, what you cut, and what you trade later.
Good stuff. All right, fellas, let's get to number 10.
Number 10.
Number 10 team ranked as high as number 8, as low as number 11. It is Cinderella Story. And Kyle, this is you.
Yeah, so Mike's team, or one of the Mikes anyway. There's a few double names in this league, which can make it fun. Now, I talked about cap situations. I looked and I ranked this team 8th without kind of looking at like the total cap remaining. It was mostly just what players they had, each team had, the contract details, like looking a little bit at picks. And then after a while, I was like, I wonder how much money he is, and I noticed the financial info tab and noticed, Mike's $264 over the cap currently. So that's the first thing is to just get yourself afloat. It's the team that is furthest over the cap among anyone. So the first priority is figuring out what to do. Luckily, those are easy decisions. So I made some quick calculations. Cutting James Conner, Devontae Parker, and Jarvis Landry saves $216. So he's still almost $50 over, but that's a lot more stomachable. Now, normally we're talking trades. We don't always dive into details of which team to trade for. Certainly, especially when the whole league is watching live. But I think there's some leverage on trading Jameis Winston to the team that has Derek Carr. And I noticed their quarterback room isn't super deep. So they might be open to that idea of trying to handcuff Carr with Winston. And then from Mike's standpoint with the Cinderella Story team, that alone, cutting Connor, Parker, Landry, trading away Winston, I think that gets him to basically afloat, under the cap, even if it's slightly. And then from there, I know I've got a dynasty team that has Eckler and CMC. It really feels like I should try to move one. And I think that's the case here is build around one as like a hero RB with one, but try and move the other. I believe McCaffrey's contract's a little bit bigger, but he also may just have without the situation of the Chargers right now, he may still hold more value. So that'll be like manager to manager, who's willing to give you the best deal. Is it on McCaffrey? Is it on Eckler? I think from Mike's standpoint, just be agnostic and sell whatever one gets you the best deal. And I think that at least sets the contract situations all right to where, maybe you try to go in on another quarterback, because right now, just trading away Winston, you'd have Russell Wilson, Mac Jones. So the priority maybe to try and add a third piece there. Because I think the rest of the team, the depth is decent enough. I mean, obviously, if you're cutting Connor and trading away one of McCaffrey, Eckler, you can also use that cap space to maybe backfill that running back and just get more depth at the running back room. So I think there's foundation. It's just when you first look at that, 264 over the cap. That's that's a little. Never mind. I guess the Winston trade has been kiboshed. Billy doesn't want Winston. I honestly, I a couple of years ago cleansed Winston off all my dynasty teams, so I can respect that, Billy, of just not wanting Winston to touch your dynasty rosters at all. Yeah. I totally understand. So sorry, Mike. Maybe someone else wants Winston though.
Yeah, it's kind of unique that we've done these for a couple of years now, and we just went live this year. So being able to get instant reaction to some of our suggestions is kind of cool.
Awesome.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in on this roster? Let's see. Where did you have him, Kyle? You had him at 8, so you were one of the higher teams on there. So let's go back to Shane again. Shane, you were the lowest on this team.
Yeah. Hold on. Now I got to find him. The quarterback room scares the hell out of me. Mac Jones is not a viable fantasy quarterback in my opinion. And then McCaffrey and Eckler both being older now. Your running back room has depth, but it's not guys that I trust. Like Dameon Pierce could get replaced or put into a timeshare. James Conner could break his elbow and be out. I do love Kyron Williams, but he's also in a timeshare. And then the fact that you have Devontae Parker, like I didn't even see that. Like I hate Devontae Parker. That dude is so overrated. So that, yeah, that's probably why I had him low. It just feels like I don't, other than Eckler and McCaffrey, he doesn't really have like that superstar player that's going to get him points every week.
It's almost like your team you're talking about, like trade Kyle Pitts and break that up into multiple pieces. Break up one of Eckler or McCaffrey, maybe potentially even both into just more depth across the board.
I think just scrolling through the roster here, this team is destined for the dreaded middle.
Yeah.
As is. And I think they need to figure out, like, I'm going one way or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always think it's easier to tier down, and you don't really have the draft capital to tier up. So something to think about.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, that's where I would go too. I'd get one of those running backs, maybe even both, and try to get some stuff out of that for sure. All right, let's get to team number 9.
Number 9.
Number 9 team ranked as high as 6 and as low as 10. So a pretty big discrepancy in this one. And Eric, this is your team, and it is Nuke Skywalker.
Yeah, based on the comments, I think it's Billy Burt's team. So hold strong on not wanting to handcuff Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. I can certainly understand that. This is a team that really kind of fits a pretty similar mold to a lot of the teams we talked about so far. Like it's within striking distance of really just landing right in the middle this season, right? So for me, I tend to err on the same side we just talked about. Probably a little bit closer to tearing this thing down and trying to collect some assets. Looking at the quarterback room, we've talked about Derek Carr. Derek Carr as your QB1 in Superflex is a very scary concept. Mm-hmm. You've got Ryan Tannehill there, a quarterback that is equally as old and potentially out the door much sooner than Derek Carr. And then you got a whole pile of guys that either are not likely to get an opportunity or saw an opportunity and did little to nothing with it. I guess you've got the lottery ticket of Tom Brady if he decides to unretire, but ultimately not a whole lot to like in the quarterback room, and similar case with the running back room. Obviously very bullish on Ramondre Stevenson overall, even though there are concerns about New England potentially drafting a running back to go with him, if not the rookie running back in Bijan Robinson this year. So I still like his outlook in the near to midterm, but behind him, I mean, you've got Joe Mixon who could potentially get cut. You've got Antonio Gibson, whose team loves to bring in other running backs around him, and a bunch of just kind of middling guys or guys that potentially need to be cut off your roster outright. Tight end, I mean, you're not going to feel good with David Njoku as your tight end 1 in a tight end premium. Yes, he can pop and have those ceiling games a little bit more than kind of your typical tight end 2, but the frequency at which that's happening is not what you're looking for. But now we get into what I think to be easily this team's biggest area of strength. You've really hit it out the park with your wide receiver room. You've got Tyreek Hill, you've got Nuke Hopkins based on your namesake. Really, really solid pieces up top, getting a little bit longer in the tooth, but you've got decent youth options as well. You've got Brandon Ayuk, who I'm a big fan of, Treylon Burks. Obviously, I think as you're seeing Ryan Tannehill move out of this offense and it hurts your quarterback room, I think that actually is going to be a boost to Treylon Burks. Josh Palmer is a guy that I like. Terrace Marshall's arrow is pointing up. So there's a lot of things to like about how you've put together this wide receiver core specifically. You've got a nice balance of guys that are at or near their peak and guys that are young and have already started to prove themselves or are ascending rapidly. And then to tie it off, I think you've got a pretty solid compilation of draft picks, right? You got 2 firsts this year. You've got a mid and a late. So you've got some flexibility there. Maybe with that mid, you can do a little bit of succession planning in your quarterback room, or you can start to bolster up that running back room a little bit. And then you've got only one first round in 2024, but a nice pile of picks. I believe you've got an additional third and an additional fourth in there. So this is really where I would focus on some of my moves, right? I think it was Brian that said it earlier. Really try to find those places where players are undervalued or even picked but undervalued, and see if you can't consolidate some of these, secondary picks in 2024 to move up a little bit this year, to move up a little bit next year, right? From a timing standpoint, I really think you're probably better served trying to really cover all your bases in 2024. So if there's any market for either of your first rounders this year, I would probably be shopping those around. And honestly, I mean, it hurts to say it, but the window for apex value is so short for running backs. I'd probably be shopping around Ramondre Stevenson, guys like Tyreek Hill, guys like DeAndre Hopkins. These are guys that are still very much so high value assets to win now teams, but I don't think you're necessarily close to being win now, right? So get them out there. Either try to get younger or try to get a little bit younger and another piece, an ancillary pick that you can package together, right? We talked about it with I believe it was the 12th team. Action is going to be your friend here, right? Just transact as much as you can. Either try to get additional assets or try to just make incremental gains with each kind of minor move, and ultimately by the time we're at this point next year, I think you're going to be in a really strong position.
Can I just interject actually with a question for the league? First off, I saw Bill's comment saying shit. I think when he came up as 9, that's probably my fault because I am the one that ranked him 10th. So that probably dragged out the average just a little bit. It's because I don't like Derek Carr. I don't really like Winston either, so I get the whole point of wanting to handcuff 2 quarterbacks I hate. But I do have a question, because I noticed Brandon Ayuk and Gibson are both about to be free agents, possibility of being extended. But they also mentioned Ayuk is the wide receiver tier 2 holdout. And based on what I gathered, the holdout amount would be $80, but Brandon Ayuk's extension after his rookie contract, if I understand correctly, would be $85 or $86, higher than the holdout. So my question is really just to the league, what happens under that circumstance? Does the holdout number take precedence regardless, or is it the highest number anyway? I mean, both amounts are close, so I feel like either way, I'd probably make that decision on to pay Ayuk that amount, but I was just curious more for the functioning of the league, and then we'll let either Shane or Brian take over. But I'm just going to ask that to the league and see what they say in the comments about that, because I just, the disparity of the holdout and extension price just confused me a little bit. So I love doing these live because we can ask people.
Good question. Yeah. And Shane, I know you wanted to chime in on one of the players that I don't know if you like him or if you hate him, but you said you wanted to chime in on him. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on Terrence Marshall Jr. Being mentored this year by the best wide receiver coach in the league, Adam Thielen.
I thought it was DJ Chark because he's always hurt.
That's a good one. No, but I think Thielen could be huge for Terrence Marshall Jr. So if he takes the mentorship and the teaching from him that we've seen him obviously give to Diggs and Jefferson, TMJ could skyrocket.
Wait a second. Are you trying to assign Diggs and Jefferson's success to the presence of Adam Thielen?
110%.
Correlation is not necessarily causality, right? I do think that he can teach Terrace Marshall a thing or two about playing wide receiver in this league. I also think it's to Terrace Marshall's benefit that he's there, because getting old and he's probably going to get hurt, and that's going to create some more playing time for the kid, right? So
yeah.
We were talking about it before the show. Terrace Marshall is another player that I am waking up to realize just how overexposed to him I am, and I'm actually kind of happy about it.
All right, so Jason is chiming in saying that like the value should be equal. So maybe I might have calculated the extension amount wrong as well. Kind of seems like Jason's the commish though, because he says if it's different, I'll have to check that. So so Jason, great work on the spreadsheets. Let's congratulate you.
It's his beautiful work that we're using for this podcast. Good stuff. All right, let's get to number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 team ranked as high as 5 and as low as 10. So again, big disparity here in the rankings. It is team, and I'm going to butcher this. Bertsicle. Is that how we pronounce that? I have no idea.
I was going Birdie.
I'd imagine so.
Yeah. So this is your team, Shane. So go ahead and give us your breakdown here.
I'm so happy that this is my team because I saw Birdie Ice LOLing in the comments after Les picks the better. Birdie Ice, I've got bad news for you. I think your team sucks. Your saving grace is Lamar Jackson. If he can stay healthy, I don't think your team will completely suck. I don't love your running back room. It looks like you went 0 RB. I hate 0 RB. And my biggest problem is that James Cook is probably your best running back. And I think they brought in Damian Harris, if I'm remembering correctly, in Buffalo. I'm scared that he's going to lose some value there and not be a 3-down back. Your wide receivers have potential, but it's going to be hard, but try and shed Michael Thomas and Allen Robinson. I know probably no one's going to want to buy them because they've been non-existent for the last 2 years, but do your best. But Brown, Pittman, and Christian Watson are a nice core, young core for your wide receivers. And then I'm a part of the Cole Kmet Club forever, so you do have a piece of my heart there. You've got some decent draft capital to boost your running back room. I think you had 2 early firsts. Don't know where that necessarily lands. If it's not 101, then I'm probably targeting Jahmyr Gibbs, Tank Bigsby, and Sean Tucker at the running back position. And if it is in the top 3, you got to take one of the quarterbacks. But yeah, I don't know. You're kind of in that middle ground like we've been talking about where you've got some nice pieces here or there, but I don't know if it's going to be enough to make the playoffs or even compete.
Yeah, that's a good call there. And Brian, I'm going to go to you because you had him ranked the highest. Shane had him the lowest at 10. Brian had him at 5. And I have a feeling, knowing Brian, that the reason he liked him so much, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but because of those draft picks. Is that why you liked him so much?
Pretty much, yeah. With these leagues, you usually have a few real stinkers that you can identify and a few people that are competing that you can identify. And there's a broad meh in the middle, right? So my 5, 6, 7, 8 are fairly interchangeable. I looked at this roster and I said, "Ooh, you've got gold. You've got 2 early firsts, right?" There's some other things I like about it too, but yeah, I mean, those are the coin of the realm right now. So yeah.
Yeah, they're definitely those early first, and I wish I would have put in there what the actual picks were, because I don't think the app that I used to pull this actually got the actual pick. But yeah, that's definitely where I'd go as well. I mean, those, like you mentioned earlier too, Brian, with collecting assets, not necessarily players that you need, but when you do the rookie draft, just getting the assets, whatever assets you can get, that even if you're not going to use them on your team, if you can flip them for somebody else. It's something that you'd want to do here because you're kind of in that middle range where you're not really competing, but you're not really bad enough to be towards the back of the draft. So I would definitely look to get some assets in that draft for sure.
Yeah, he's got the 2 early first, but he's loaded up with seconds this year too, right? I think he's got 4 second rounders, and those things are deal makers, right? Like whenever you're at a stalemate, it is easy enough to weave one of those in and get a deal over the line, right? So not only do you have high value draft picks there in your war chest, but you also have the little tactical pieces that you need to smooth over a tough negotiation.
Absolutely.
And tons of cap space. So this is the type of team that probably could take on the bad contracts, quote unquote. Like, you can cut Melvin Gordon, Michael Thomas pretty easily right now, but there also is no pressure to. And I think just looking at their extensions, Michael Pittman's like a so easy extension. He probably don't. Brandon probably doesn't need for me to tell him to extend Michael Pittman, but do that for sure. And then all the other players he could extend probably aren't worth it anyway.
Right, exactly. We said all the time, going back to the draft picks, that to Eric's point, draft picks in Dynasty is like capital. It's like money. I mean, it's basically what it is. And as you get closer to the draft, those picks will be even more valuable. Get some stuff done with those picks.
Just quick trade idea. Do you guys, obviously we love Lamar Jackson, but do you think it would be wise to break up Lamar Jackson to try and get like 2 like lesser top 15 quarterbacks? Or would you just ride it out with Jackson and try and just plug in random QB2s behind? How would you guys go about it?
I think because he's got the early first, he could spend one of those on one of the quarterbacks in this class.
True. Yeah.
And then you'd have 2 potentially mobile quarterbacks paired together. They're both young. They're both talented.
Because I interpret early as being top 4.
Yeah.
Like 1 through 4. So that's even potentially multiple quarterbacks. If he's got multiple picks, you platoon your QB2 with rookies. That's true. I guess that context mattered. Okay. Yeah. So don't break up Lamar Jackson. No, good point, Shane.
If it were like, let's say he was on the 12th team, 100% agree with you. Break up Lamar Jackson, go for draft capital or other quarterbacks, specifically younger quarterbacks. But because he's got the early draft capital, I think he can supplant it with those draft picks.
Yeah.
He does say he's building for the future. So in the comments.
Yeah.
Good stuff. All right. We're on number 7.
Number 7.
Number 7 team ranked as high as 4 and as low as 10. And it is Thou Shall Not Pass. And Brian, this is your squad.
Yeah, and I'm one of the 2 folks who ranked it 10. And listen, I know that there are other places that grown men can spend good money to be humiliated. And, those people doing it look a lot better than us usually. So I really appreciate you enduring this along with us. So the only reason I have this ranked above my 11 team is because their best tradable pieces are better than the number 11 team. But there's not much capital to help the situation. So I look at a team and I say, are you competing? No. Okay. What are your tradable pieces? Okay. What is your draft capital? Right. So to me, that's kind of why I've got you ranked so low. You've got no reliable tight ends and a tight end premium. Even though I saw in the chat, you don't have to start one. You do get a premium. The premium's low. It's 1.5, but it's something, right? So you've got nothing there. You've got Hurts, AJB, Kenneth Walker, and then not really much else to work with. Dobbins and Adams are okay. They're kind of at lower points in their value cycle than you'd want them to be for the most part. So my recommendation is to reboot here. Again, you're trying to turn pieces into multiple pieces, including picks. You want to get 24 firsts or 24 seconds whenever possible. I'm trading Ritter. I'm trading Howell. I'm trading KW3. I'm trading Dobbins. I'm trading Devontae Adams. I'm trading Kirk. And maybe even A.J. Brown if necessary. I'm holding Perine until in season. He's very underrated. He's a buy for me right now. What's going to happen is Javonte's probably not going to start the year. Perine may not be super athletic, but he is super productive, and he was in when he was in relief of Mixon. The coach has said, I want to use multiple backs. Perine said, I signed with the team because they want to use multiple backs. He's going to start scoring points early in the season. His value will go up. That's when you will trade him. I want you to hold Ty Chandler. You're not going to get much for him now, but it's very likely Dalvin Cook is gone, right? And when he is, Chandler could be Madison's primary backup, right? So again, now you've got, a value bump on a guy who you could maybe barely get a 4th for. Now, in the 2023 rookie draft, I want you to turn your late first into multiple pieces, right? I want you to trade picks when you're on the clock to people who want players who are on the board, and you want to seek value, get 24s, get extra picks, get value players to start filling in on the edges, right? So, so you're playing that value game too. So, pretty similar recommendations to the other team that I covered before. By the way, you might be asking, why am I trading Kenneth Walker? A crazy guy like Kyle has him as his dynasty RB1. It's because by the time you are competitive, Kenneth Walker really won't be in his prime. And BT Dubs, he might be getting some company in the draft next week too, right? Dobbins, same thing. Like, he flashed really well at the end of the year, so he's got a good taste in people's mouths, right? But you never know, man. The Ravens, are they gonna have Lamar? Are they gonna rotate 19 backs like they love to do, right? Plus, again, RBs. You don't need RBs if you're not competing. Yeet. Trade Dobbins for stuff. You can get stuff for Kirk, right? Ridley looming. Might as well get rid of him now before Ridley starts eating into his production, etc. Right? So, Howell, Ritter, you can't really have faith in them, but they're starters right now. So, boom, trade them, because otherwise you're going to be sitting there, and could their value take a spike if they do well? Sure. But by week 8, could, Taylor Heineke and Jacoby Brissett on the Washington?
Yeah, Brissett's Commanders. Yep.
Yeah. So they could be.
Heineke's in Atlanta. Sorry.
Right. They could be starting in a few weeks. And so that's a non-zero chance. So, trade a starter in a super flex now while you can.
Yeah.
And I mean, to the same point earlier you made about Geno Smith, is there any chance that either of those teams drafts a quarterback? Like, you might want to make these trades this week.
Atlanta could trade for Trey Lance.
Yeah. I think because the complication here with this team is Jalen Hurts isn't under contract. They're going to have to go through the holdout extension. And I believe, if I saw that correctly, they're currently over the cap. So the team needs to kind of, first off, fill out some moves. Like you mentioned, trade players away. I'm frankly just cutting Zeke. Like, I think cut him now. Don't worry about where he lands. Worry about that when it comes time to the auction. I think you save $139 just by cutting Zeke. That's more than enough to cover Hurts's, like, get you under the cap and probably cover a chunk of Hurts's extension. So Zeke's an easy cut. And if you're extending Hurts, you could probably afford to cut Mayfield and try and get a QB2 more cheaply as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. Eric, I want you to chime in a little bit because you are on the opposite end here. You have him at 5. I know Shane's got him a little bit higher than you, but I've already picked on Shane enough. So I want to get your thoughts here and why you like this team so much at 5.
I will take that opportunity to pick on Shane because nobody in the world, and certainly not nobody on this here stream, is a bigger Baker Mayfield fan than me.
Shut the fuck up.
So I think the reason why I'm a bit more bullish on this team than others, actually Shane and I both had this team ranked relatively high and pretty close. I mean, for starters, at the 3 required positions that you must roster week in and week out, you have players that are within my top 5 of my dynasty ranks, if not number 1 overall. So it's hard to acquire those kind of players, and usually when you see a team that has multiple of them, you go to their draft capital and it's bottomed out. And this team looks like it's got a pretty standard issuance of picks left, right? So you've still got some flexibility to add and to build to this team by way of the draft. And while we've talked about a lot of these kind of middling teams thus far, this one feels a bit more like a productive struggle, right? You've obviously got Jalen Hurts. You can platoon at quarterback 2 for presumably the majority of the year, potentially longer. Some of these players take on, like Baker Mayfield. And if nothing else, if it feels like it's going the other way, you have some of the highest value assets on the board in terms of players to really get a lot of not only return, but a lot of flexibility in how you want to approach your rebuild, right? So I do think that this team is probably a little bit closer towards stepping into that competitive realm, right? You need to hit on your 2023 draft picks and do well with those. But if you decide to pull the ripcord, I think you're probably looking at a very quick turnaround time on that rebuild, which is hard to do, right? Rebuilds have a way of just kind of dragging on forever. So I would almost say it's like a high utility score that had me rank this team a bit higher.
Nice. Good stuff. All right, let's get to team number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 was pretty close as far as the rankings go here. Ranked as high as 6, as low as 8. Everybody was kind of on the same page on this team. It is Bounty Law. And Kyle, this is your squad.
Yeah, and I was one of the managers that did rank them at 6. And I think part of it is just right off the bat, I think Justin Herbert's contract is the most valuable asset in this entire league. A 5-year contract, and I wrote this down correctly, just over $30 per year. 2.5% of the cap for Herbert. So I think part of it is that contract alone gives this team so much flexibility to build around that. They can overspend on some other positions. I mean, what is this? 300 and basically just over $300 for Alvin Kamara and James Robinson combined. Now, to be fair, James Robinson's probably an easy cut. In that, yeah, you're saving $94 almost on him. So that's kind of an easy way to save some money. I guess they don't really have any major needs, and all the players coming off rookie contracts. It's Anthony McFarland, Darrington Evans, Eno Benjamin. Like, I'm not worried about extending any of them. So in that sense, like, I think I liked it because it felt like this team was already kind of set up. Now the complication is Kyler Murray at QB2, and it's funny. I've got a Kyler Murray team that has this exact problem. It's like, what to do with Kyler? Am I competing with him through the year? Is this, because I feel like with having Herbert, you feel like you should be able to compete, but with Kyler, it almost feels like Kyler's more of a quarterback for teams that are trying to rebuild. So that's interesting. So maybe it's pick a lane, pick a direction. Maybe that's a trade to happen. trading Kyler Murray for a quarterback that will be healthy to start from week 1. I know Brian mentioned earlier some quarterbacks that are undervalued. I mean, if Kyler's undervalued, I think Tua's super undervalued. So can you pivot off Kyler to get to Tua? They're banking on Tua playing more games than Kyler this year, which is obviously no guarantee for any player. But just some thoughts in that area. But really, the one thing I could just, again, so obviously say was cut James Robinson. I think I calculated they'll have, Jason will have like almost $119 going into the auction as one of the highest teams with cap space too. So, and with not a whole lot of spots needing to fill, I love that, having tons of cap space, but not needing too many contracts. You can overspend on specific players you want to add to this team. So just for that type of flexibility, again, really just that Herbert contract just blew me away in terms of how cheap that extension was, probably coming off of because I believe that would have been a rookie pick, 2020 rookie pick. So it would have probably gone super, which I think we all remember that, how much Herbert fell in rookie drafts, right? And in contract leagues, especially the way this one's structured, if you get a player super late in the draft and you hit on them, you're rewarded by their extension seemingly not being as expensive as the first round picks. So yeah, I think just having that contract alone will give him flexibility for the next half decade in this league. So I think that alone is what kind of elevated him into the top 6. I don't think I could have gone any higher than 6, but that's anyway. That's why I apparently the spreadsheet extraordinaire, Jason, which the whole league seems to be appreciating of it in the chat. I know Jacob mentioned that. One of the Berts mentioned that too. So yeah, so showing some love to Jason here and his team, even though I think saw he only won 4 games last year, but maybe one more this year.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy to me. And great breakdown, Kyle, because contracts is not something that I'm really good at. So I had this team ranked the same as you at 6, not knowing the contract with Justin Herbert. So that makes me like them even more. Because you're right. I mean, Herbert, at least in my home league, he went in like the mid-3rd round. He's like a top quarterback now. So if that determines the value, then that's definitely a great piece to have for sure. Love the breakdown. All right, to number 5.
Number 5.
Number 5 team was ranked as high as number 3 and as low as number 9. So a pretty big disparity here. And this is Trub Blitzkrieg, obviously, because Trubisky. I don't know if you're a fan of Trubisky or if you just happen to keep your name when you drafted him so long ago. But Eric, this is your squad here. Give us your breakdown.
Yeah, I was the aforementioned highest ranker on this team. I'm the one that had them at 3. And overall, I mean, this team is super solid from top to bottom. You've got that hard to come by combination of guys that are at apex value or very rapidly approaching it, with young guys at every position that are either contributing in a meaningful enough way or have their arrow pointing up and opportunity right in front of them, right? So you look at the trio that you have: a quarterback, Josh Allen, and Aaron Rodgers is a rock-solid 1-2 punch. And then you've got Jared Goff, who, despite a very strong year last year, I still think is an underrated or undervalued Superflex dynasty asset, right? So there was some shakeup with his wide receiver room today, but ultimately I do think that Goff has found his way into a really solid situation in Detroit and has a lot of runway in front of him. And then, kind of like I talked about off the top, right, you just kind of alternate through this running back room, and you have guys that are, near the top of the dynasty rankings or guys that are emerging and favorited to be that way, right? So you've got Jonathan Taylor. Obviously, I don't need to expound on that point. I like Miles Sanders' situation this year. Obviously, his track is a little bit shorter as he's a little bit older than some of these guys. But then you get into guys like Brian Robinson, like Isaiah Pacheco, guys that are very young and should still have some upside in front of them. And your wide receiver room is just a perfect balance, right? Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin. I mean, these are guys that were ranked, inside the top 5 or 7 in terms of dynasty wide receivers as recently as a year or 2 ago. And by and large, you can expect steady production out of them. And you've got young pieces to go right along with them, right? Khalil Shakur, I'm a big fan of. Amari Cooper is obviously older, but one of the more consistent wide receiver 2 values out there. this is a tight end premium league, so having Mark Andrews goes a long, long way, right? A little bit of a down stretch to finish the year last year, but still plenty of reason to be optimistic he's going to be a top 3 or so guy for years to come. And the overarching point, I kind of made it when we were talking about thou shalt not pass. Usually when you see a team that has this combination of top line players and emerging depth behind it, usually they're bottomed out at when it comes to their draft capital, and that's not the case at all. You've got a full complement of picks for the upcoming 3 years. You've obviously moved a little bit in 2023, so you got 2 firsts, you got 2 fourths. I think that's a perfectly fine position to be in. Honestly, I would be looking for kind of some depth pieces, either at tight end if you want to get a little bit younger in your quarterback room. You could do that. You could also get a little bit younger in your running back room, which I think is probably going to be kind of the juiciest part of the draft with where your picks fall. So ultimately, this team feels like it is right on the precipice. It can certainly compete in this league. And I think the question is, for how long, and depending on how effective you are with your draft picks this year, I think the answer to that could be for a good stretch here. So I really like what Trublitzkrieg has put together here, and I will not try to say that name again.
Well, I'm going to say maybe he should avoid Trublitzkrieg and go bombs away. I think he should just drop Trubisky, honestly. Looking at their financial situation, they've only got $24 in cap space, and cutting Trubisky opens up another 36. So more than doubling their cap space just by getting rid of Trubisky, who's like the QB4 in the team, and he's a backup quarterback. So I think I just cut Trubisky.
Yeah,
frankly, as much as it pains for the name, because the one thing that this team doesn't have a lot of holes, but they also don't have a lot of there's still spots to be filled. So they could, be really even with more money, they could, Andre could really bully the board in a sense, because he'll have a bit more money relative to some other managers, but not having any clear needs, could just go for what the best values are, the best players, and fill the back. And I mean, like you mentioned, Eric, also having tons of picks too to fill up those spots. So good situation to be in. And I like Dirt Roberts' comment, steady playoff / championship. I think we're at the point where we're kind of expecting these are the teams that will compete as we get to this top 5 and obviously all the teams within it.
Agreed 100%. And yeah, what stood out to me, I had him ranked just below you, Eric, at number 4. And you have a potential QB1 or the QB1 in Josh Allen. You have a potential RB1 in Jonathan Taylor. You have the potential tight end 1 in Mark Andrews. And you have a guy in Cooper Kupp that maybe he's not the RB, the WR1 anymore, but the potential is still potentially there to be a top 5. So
points per game he was last year, PPR points per game, he finished ahead of Jefferson. So he could, he plays a full season, he could finish as the wide receiver
20 targets a game. How the hell could you not be wide receiver 1?
Just looking at their extensions too, I don't think I'm extending Clyde Edwards-Helaire, especially cutting Trubisky. If you're going to save that money, I mean, maybe that's one way to use it. If Edwards-Helaire is better than any of the free agents available, but I think I would just keep my flexibility and let CEH go to the auction. If someone else wants him, claim him.
Yep. I was going to move on to team 4, but we do have a question, and I want to see if Brian can just quickly chime in here, because Brian, you were the one that had him at 9. If you can kind of give some insight into why you didn't like this team as much.
Yeah, it's maybe a tad unkind, and I think one reason is I might have missed the mid first because it was after the first and the 2 fourths on our list.
Yeah, it put them in alphabetical order on that screen. That kind of messed things up.
Yeah, but I think you're a little overweight at running back, and I think Pacheco and B-Rob are huge sells. And Kupp is undervalued in some circles, but he is 29. I just, DJ Moore I think is completely overrated. Terry McLaurin's overrated. Amari Cooper is, possibly a value, but we've got Elijah Moore in town now. There's just nothing that really popped out at me where I was like, oh yeah, besides Josh Allen and JT, right? Especially learning if you don't have to start a tight end. I don't know. There's nothing where I was like, yeah, it's kind of mid. Yeah.
Fair enough.
It also seemed like you mentioned this earlier, Brian, the bottom 2 or 3 teams are obvious. And then 9 through 5, 6, whatever seemed super close too.
Yeah. Agreed.
Just to Brian's point, Brian Robinson and Isaiah Pacheco still being on rookie contracts makes them probably super easy to move too. So because there's some players, trade this player, but if the contract's so huge, no one will want them. I think those are two players that a lot of teams could be willing to absorb. So to your point, Brian, they both might be sells and you might be able to get value off of both.
Fair point. All right.
Kyle, I have a quick contract question. I didn't understand it, so I didn't look at it too hard. Would you cut Kenyon Drake off of this team pretty easily?
So looking at it, it says 47.76. You save 13. I think you could.
Okay.
I'm really looking at, because there's he'll still have to eat $34 in dead cap, right? So that much is on your contract whether he's on the team or not.
Yeah.
But you might just cut him because you're saving a bit, and B to save the roster spot more than anything.
Yeah.
So I think Drake's cuttable.
Okay. That was just something that popped out to me when I was looking at it just now.
Yeah. That's fair. I think there's quite a few players probably throughout the teams that I haven't mentioned as cuttable that are in that situations where, you can cut them, but you don't save that much. I think it was Allen Robinson's contract. You don't save a ton by cutting him. So you might almost just see what he can do for 1 year. And then you can always, still cut him later at times.
I said trade him.
Yeah, because everyone wants Allen Robinson, right, Shane?
Exactly. I didn't say it would be easy.
All right, let's get to team number 4.
Number 4.
Number 4 team ranked as high as as low as 7, as high as number 3, and it is MetLife Cats. And Shane, this is your team, and once again, you had this team as the lowest. I gave him all your low point teams.
All of my low points because Jeff hates me, and I'm gonna go ahead and apologize to the MetLife Cats because I think Eric copied my rankings for this one, and I think I ranked you too low. After going through the team again and writing down my notes, I think I had you a little bit too low. You do have some nice pieces, especially your quarterbacks. Like Burrow, top 5 quarterback potentially, and then Cousins and Stafford, I think, are 2 strong pieces that you can kind of play matchups. Like if Cousins isn't at home, bench his ass. Etienne and Najee are 2 of my favorite young running backs. I have them on my home dynasty league, and with as old as King Henry is, you might as well just hold on to him at this point and let him get you points when he can, which is pretty often. A.J. Dillon, I think, is a piece that you could trade, especially if Rodgers eventually leaves. This Packers team could continue to be run heavy, and you could probably capitalize on his value. Your tight ends, I've actually talked myself into them. I think you have decent enough guys that you can play the matchups and kind of rotate them in, especially with it being tight end premium. Wide receivers are easily your best position. I'm going to go against the grain a little bit probably and say try and trade Debo and Gabe Davis, though. But to Brian's point earlier, not right now. Debo's value is probably lower than it has been. Wait until in season and they have one of their big blow-up games and then try and move them. Because I think they're 2 guys that get a huge boost in value that I think you could move and strengthen team in other positions. But T. Higgins and DK Metcalf are 2 of my favorite players, so absolutely love those guys. And they're young enough to be cornerstones on your team for a while. Your draft capital is about average, but you are definitely a contender with this team.
Yeah, this team definitely is super solid. I think I had them as one of the higher ranked. I had them at 3, actually. So, yeah, me and Kyle are both at the top there. And, super flex leagues, first thing I look at is the quarterbacks. And you're right. I mean, you got Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford. I think if we were to compare all the teams we looked at, this is so far the best quarterback room of all the teams we've looked at. We get to some of the higher end ones, then it might change that. But, yeah, definitely a good quarterback room. Najee Harris, I like a lot. People are down on him only because he had supposedly a down season. But if you look at how much touches he had last year and the amount of usage that he had last year, is he going to be a top 3 running back? Maybe not, but he's still going to be solid every single year as long as he continues to get that usage. And that type of offense, he's going to get tons of usage. So I love Najee Harris.
So
you mentioned
shameless. Sorry to interrupt you, but shameless plug. Episode coming out Monday of Red Zone Redemption, I actually talked about Najee because if you look at the Steelers offense, they've got all the pieces. Even if you count Pickett, they've got all the pieces that they believe in. They've just got to improve their offensive line. And if they do that, I think Najee's efficiency numbers will actually increase and then make him more valuable.
Yeah,
he certainly looked
improve
better.
their offensive line and get rid of Matt Canada, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't have guys just running 9 routes and expect to move an offense in today's NFL.
Why not? It worked for Freddie Kitchens.
And if you look at the top 10 or 12 running backs in Dynasty right now, and you filter out ones that are maybe aging a little bit, like CMC and Eckler and Saquon, and you filter out some guys who have uncertain futures, like, is Jacobs going to be a Raider next year? I think Etienne is overrated, right? You start versus Stevenson, who knows, right? Like, I'm trading Stevenson every chance I get. Najee Harris is probably going to come out on the other side of this draft looking pretty fine,
Yeah.
And like, when all the explosions are done and he's just kind of standing there, like, he's going to have some value.
Absolutely.
And Benny Snell is no longer on the team. And for some god-awful reason, they gave Benny Snell touches, so.
Yeah.
Well, Jaylen Warren they finally found the replacement, right, with Jaylen Warren. I'll be honest.
Exactly.
So, like Jeff was mentioning, like he and I both had it at 3. To me, the top 3 teams, I was so close. Like I could have put Andy's team here at number 1. Just, solid quarterback room. And yeah, Derrick Henry's there, but also built around several rookie contracts at running back. So I love the team construction. You can overspend on the several top 24 wide receivers, several top 20 wide receivers, because the flexibility of the rookie contracts. And Shane, to your point, like ride out Henry, and if something happens to him, you can always cut him next year, right? Like I would say, like not rushing to trade him, like just at this point, ride out the production, because it seems like this team is competing. So the type of team you would want to have Henry on.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right, number 3.
Number 3.
Number 3 team was ranked as high as 3 and as low as 5. So everybody's kind of right in the same range there. And it is the 12th man. And Brian, this is your squad here.
I really like the team. I'm one of the people who ranked them 3. First of all, you have Patrick Mahomes, period. Boom. Right. Like that, you've got the best player in Dynasty. And besides that, you have a pretty good quarterback room. As much as I'm not really a Purdy believer, the 49ers are, and he's the type of quarterback you can plug into an offense like the West Coast Shanahan offense. And he doesn't have to be a great quarterback to be pretty productive. And we saw that, late in the season. So you actually have a little bit of depth in your quarterback room that you could probably play with, like, for example, trading Jimmy G. Your running backs are okay. Foreman is underrated. And I think, he's going to get some run in Chicago. They brought him in for specific reasons. They're running a more even mix of zone and gap. And I think him and Herbert are both going to be productive, maybe not, elite and number ones, but I also think they're going to be relatively okay after the draft. Like, I think if they were going to draft a running back of note, they probably wouldn't have signed Foreman. If anything, they might bring in like a satellite back, like a pass catcher. That's just the way that I see it. I could be wrong. The NFL does things weird all the time. You've got your Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison situation covered, right? So I think Dalvin Cook is not going to be a Viking by the time we're done with the NFL draft. So you actually are in pretty good shape, because 1, now Madison elevates to an RB1 on your team, and 2, you have Dalvin Cook, who is going to be a contributor wherever he ends up, right? So he'll still be okay, right? And you now have kind of 2 running backs instead of like the 1, right? So you can maybe even trade Cook. You're not going to get much for a 28-year-old running back, but he could fill a need later on in the season. Say you have an injury at wide receiver or something like that. You have a little bit more flexibility there. He's going to land somewhere. He's going to be usable. Jacobs is good. Monty is fine. I think those are fine as far as running backs go. You're a little heavy though at running back. I tend to be more of a hero RB, 0 RB guy than Shane. So you could be better at tight end, but not bad. Especially learning that you don't have to start one. It's not that bad. You have J. Jeff and Chase, right? You've got the number 1 quarterback. You got the top 2 ranked wide receivers in Dynasty, right? Yep. They're elite, but your wide receivers lack depth. You could do worse than Wandale, OBJ, Kyle Phillips, who could be a nice safety blanket for Tannehill, Gallup, and DPJ. But I'm not confident going into the season with those guys behind J. Jeff and Chase. So that's an area I'd like to see you improve. you have a first and 2 seconds and a total of 7 picks on top of all these good things that I've talked about, right? So you've got currency to play with. You're a competitive team that could use a few pieces to look better. So what you want to find are value moves that protect your core whenever possible. I would trade Jimmy G. He's a starting quarterback in a super flex. You don't need him. Your quarterback room is good enough. I would not rule out trading Jefferson or Chase, but not in a way where you just like sacrifice, the eliteness for depth. You want to tier down to still a very useful receiver. I don't know, say Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave.
I was going to even name higher and say you could just tier down to AJ Brown, where you're still potentially getting a top 5 guy, but you're still going to get a plus.
And then get you're getting the plus on top of one of those guys. And you can then use it for another area of your team. I would consider taking Jordan Addison with your late first if he's around. If not, I would trade back. That might be a good idea because, consider trading in the late first for multiple picks, even if Addison is there too, right? It's a way to add bullets and work on that depth because you're a competitive team, but you do need to add some value pieces without really affecting the core too much. Right now, as it stands, the late first round and early second round in Superflex for me are a pretty flat, low value tier of players. That may shuffle up depending on where some of these running backs get draft capital and landing spot, right? So if like a guy like Addison, who isn't going to give me instant receiver depth, which you need, isn't there, I might consider trading out, because you can get, say, for that pick, you can get maybe a second and a 24 second, or 2 seconds now, or a second and 2/3. And now instead of Jordan Addison, you've got Marvin Mims and a tight end and Mingo, so you're adding to it, right? And I would look to add lower cost running backs and tight ends with your later picks in the rookie draft. What you want to do in rookie drafts later on is usually pound 0 RB guys, pound those guys that you're going to be putting them in for injuries and buys, right? Because running back is an elevator, wide receiver is an escalator.
Those round 4 wide receivers, they almost seem like they're not worth it when you're spending 3rd and 4th round rookie picks on them.
Yeah, they're like the 6th or 7th wide receiver on your team, and so you're better off getting tight ends at a premium because you're not spending that much on them. So guys like Laporta, Musgrave this year, hell, even Schoonmaker, right? Mallory, these are gonna be guys who, even though rookie tight ends don't gain or even lose value sometimes, you're not spending a lot on them, and they could hit at a pretty good rate relative to the capital that you're using. So that would be my plan for you. I like what 12th man is doing, and hopefully you can be first man.
Well, apparently Kyle thought he was going to be number 1, and as someone who is named Kyle and kind of cocky, I can understand why.
Take that, Kyle's.
Hey, having Mahomes, having Jefferson, having Chase, right? Like you think those 3 assets, I should be number 1, right? I guess the one thing with Mahomes is, relative to some of the other elite quarterbacks, you are paying for him. Now, it almost just seems like the other quarterbacks are just so cheap. Like Mahomes for $183, just over 10%, though it's we're talking about a $1,200 budget. That probably makes sense. It doesn't feel like it's too much to spend for him. But when Josh Allen is half that value, which is why I had some of the other teams ahead of this, and I ranked this team 5th, is that elite quarterbacks, but with cheaper contracts, more flexibility, especially loving the Joe Burrow contract, $66. I was talking about Justin Herbert's contract, but Burrow's contract's almost as insane of a value. So I think that's
what was Herbert's number again?
30.
Yeah.
Again, it's so late in the rookie drafts, right? Those extensions are cheaper than someone who was a startup pick like Mahomes, or B, a first round rookie pick.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything else to say. Because it looks like Brock Purdy is probably the best free agent quarterback available. So it doesn't seem like this team has the ability to extend them. So can you save enough money to re-win Purdy in the auction, especially if you do what Brian said and trade away Garoppolo? I'd be aggressive to try and re-win Purdy in the auction as the 3rd QB behind Mahomes and Daniel Jones.
Gotcha. It's a good call right there because that's something that I didn't even look at about.
And context matters, right? Jason's saying the league definitely undervalued QB in the initial draft, so extensions coming up were cheaper, or just
Gotcha.
Yeah, you remember how much hate Josh Allen had before his second season? He could have been acquired so cheaply, and it seems like this league happened long enough ago that we had to take advantage.
Absolutely. All right, so we're down to the last two teams, and just judging by our ranks, this is like the tier break right here. I think team number 2 was ranked 2 by almost all of us, and team number 1 was ranked by 1 almost all of us. So they're definitely really close 2 teams. But let's go ahead and jump into these last 2 here.
Number 2.
Number 2 team, like I mentioned, ranked as high as 1, as low as 2, and it is Alaskan Bullworms. And Kyle, this is your team.
Yeah, so as Jeff was referencing, no one ranked either of these top 2 teams anything other than 1 or 2. So so that's a good point with the tier break. In terms of things, what to do. So there's decisions to make with this team. And I could see on the spreadsheet, I think they've already made one of the decisions. Looks like Rob may have accepted the holdout amount on Jamal Williams. So, maybe Jason or someone could chime in, correct me if I'm wrong, but just seeing how he turns up on the spreadsheet with a 1-year contract at $71, I'd assume Rob's already decided I'm paying Jamal Williams that holdout. So assuming that decision's made, the DeAndre Swift talk, like what to do with Swift, right? Which is funny that suddenly those two aren't on the same team anymore. Maybe you get two separate running backs that you can utilize every week. I think if I'm calculating the extension amount right, it's right around $45. But I also noticed this team only has about $40 in cap space. So there's got to be a cap saving move somewhere. Sorry, Jeff. I don't like to cut your 49ers players. We just talked about Brock Purdy, but cutting Sam Darnold is probably the case. And chime in. Do you really think Sam Darnold's going to start at all for this team?
So it's a little bit up for debate. A friend of mine who's a Niners fan as well is convinced that Sam Darnold is going to be the starter, that we're trying to trade Trey Lance, and that Purdy won't be ready for the beginning of the season. And he thinks that Sam Darnold fits the Shanahan scheme pretty well. So he could potentially start a couple games. I think Purdy is the ultimate goal there. But yeah, I think Darnold definitely for a QB3. If you look at Shanahan's history, he has rarely had a quote unquote good quarterback at the QB3. They're mostly just bums. And having Darnold there as a former first-round pick definitely makes me nervous that he might be our starter for at least part of the season this year.
Jeff, you never told us that you were friends with Sam Darnold. You should have him on the show sometime.
Because I was going to say, what do you mean he fits the system? Does Shanahan love crappy quarterback play? I guess he does. So
yes, he does.
All right, well, there you go. Never mind, he'll fit. No, but because I think that's a way to save most of what you would need for the Swift extension, and maybe there's a trade to be made somewhere. Knowing what Brian was talking about earlier, what are the teams earlier? Trading away a rookie on a running back on a rookie contract, potentially trading away Rachaad White. And I love Rachaad White, but he has really spiked in value this offseason. Maybe that's another good way to free up some moves, free up some cap space. I do think there's a lot of really good cheap contracts on this team. And Barkley makes quite a lot. Diggs and Ridley are over $100, but the two quarterbacks locked in right now with Lawrence and Fields. I guess okay, so looking at the comments, sorry, Jason's chiming in. He hasn't confirmed yet on Williams, so he would have to decide. I almost wonder, with his lack of cap space, you're almost having to decide: am I paying that holdout for Jamal Williams, or am I extending DeAndre Swift?
Right.
I think if it's either or, I think I just want to take Swift, because I think the extension amount will be cheaper than Williams' contract holdout. And even if, let's say, Swift gets less touches this year than Jamal Williams does on a Saints team with Kamara suspended, his efficiency might carry him enough to where their fantasy points would be equal enough. So if it's deciding between Williams and Swift, I think I would extend Swift. Again, knowing it.
Swift likely is on another team after 2023, another NFL team. And I think he'll do a little better. He'll be used a little differently.
Agreed.
So would you want, because I think they may have some control over the years of the extension, not the amounts, that's kind of set, but I think like Rob could decide, okay, do I just want to extend Swift 1 year or up to 5 years? So maybe to your point, Brian, he should extend Swift for 2 seasons, this season, and then next year when he would have him on a new team, thinking that maybe there's a spike in value and his whatever salary he pays next year will be
yeah.
cheap considering his new situation. So you want to extend him past his rookie contract in the NFL.
Yeah, I don't want to run too long, but like when it comes to Jamal Williams, right? Like you can say like, oh, he had 1 million TDs, TD regression, all of them were from the 1 yard line. But how much is that balanced out by Kamara's suspension and the fact that people forget that Jamal Williams can catch passes too? So there's going to be a bump for Jamal Williams. So if I'm sacrificing Jamal Williams 2023 safe production, I'm going to want to extend Swift more than just this one season to make it worth it.
Fair point. Just to go back on to Sam Darnold, in my so-called love for Sam Darnold, he actually won me a chip this year because I lost Kyler Murray and then I lost Ryan Tannehill as my backup, so I rode Sam Darnold to a championship. Sam Darnold and Jerick McKinnon were my 2 MVPs for my championship run this past season. So
awesome. I tried to do that in a league where I lost Lamar Jackson, and yeah, that didn't work.
Didn't work out for you. All right, let's get to the number 1. Number one team is Bijan Freeze. Ranked as high as 1, as low as 2. Shane was the one outlier here. He had him at 2. Eric, this is your squad here. Give us your breakdown.
Let me start by giving a full-throated boo towards Shane. I mean, just absolutely ridiculous. Such a
just cause, right?
God.
Oh wait, it's because it was rankings. I thought you were just doing it because you wanted to, Eric.
No, I mean it's
would be typical Eric.
This is just a thinly veiled reason to boo Shane in public. I mean, look, this team was ranked number 1 by everyone not named Shane, pronounced hater of the group, and it's rock solid from top to bottom, right? So I'm not gonna belabor all of the points, right? I mean, for me, the things that really push this team over are threefold. Your wide receiver room is impeccable.
Yeah.
Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Drake London, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, just like the young stars that you absolutely want to build around. And your quote unquote secondary players are guys like Chris Godwin and Rashad Bateman. So, I mean, just an embarrassment of riches at the wide receiver position. While we have learned today that you are not required to start a tight end, if you're playing tight end premium and you can trot out guys like Travis Kelce and Dallas Goedert, you're probably going to have a positional advantage, I guess a flex advantage in this case, over most teams week in and week out. Running back room, really it kind of boils down to your overall position on guys like Javonte Williams coming back from the knee injury, like Aaron Jones and how much value he has in the upcoming season, and maybe outside of Green Bay, but ultimately super solid there. Really like the quarterback room as well. Deshaun Watson, prior to his half or third of the season last year, was playing at an elite level in prior seasons in Houston. Super solid option in Dak Prescott. I'm a huge Tua Tags fan. Hopefully he can stay on the field. I think he can, in which case you've got one of the more competitive QB rooms as well. And I'm only assuming, I mean, obviously I'm in love with the draft capital overall. 2 early firsts this year, 2 firsts next year, a couple of seconds sprinkled in there. So real nice flexibility with the draft capital overall. But based on the name Bijan Freeze, I'm assuming one of those early firsts this year is the 101. So you're not only going to have a lot of flexibility with, how you go out and, either get a little bit younger or build some depth at these positions, but also you could probably get a haul for that pick from a number of people in this league, right? So you don't need to, hit a home run with your draft picks this year. Obviously it will help bolster the team overall. But if you do, I mean, you've got the inside track to a championship. If you decide to move out of that, I mean, you can keep this thing rolling for years and years to come. So if nothing else, well done. I would be thrilled to take over this team. And Shane is the biggest hater in the world.
I just real quick, I just want to boo both Jeff and Eric. It's Bijan Freeze, right? Because we see the accent mark on the team here. Let's work with it here, and it's a pun on the dog breed, I believe, the Bichon Frise. So.
Oh, look at
Although not
I
to
was
be
told there would be no math.
Yeah, Brian is a teacher, so
Well,
that's where that comes from.
Well, here I'm going to go with the French lesson here because if it's Frise, he has the wrong accent because that says Bichon Frise. So unless that's what he's going for, right? Like that should be
all right.
The.
I would like to address Billy Burt's question in the chat. That is honestly why I ranked him too.
You have done that before in PLP, so you are consistent.
Yes,
this guy taking the moral high ground.
Baker Mayfield lover and girl dad, like Deshaun Watson can choke on one of, yeah. I did, but to wrap this all up before we do, I'm a complete moron because I totally missed that you had 2 early firsts. Don't know how, but completely missed that. But I'm sticking with my moral high ground and saying Deshaun can go choke on one.
Fair enough.
Obligatory, Shane. Yeah, it's never stop being you, Shane.
One thing I will just throw out there, not to poo-poo this team at all, but there is one thing. My co-host, Ryan Searfoss, on our Wednesday night show is absolutely convinced that the Cowboys are going to draft Bijan Robinson, and that might put a little damper on Tony Pollard a little bit, but you'd still have Bijan Robinson on your team, so you can get on.
That's the thing, though. Like, it looks like he needs to qualify the holdout at $115, essentially, which I think I'm just letting Pollard walk. It's because especially if Bijan goes there, that's probably way overpaid. So I'll take the risk. I think this team has, I thought I saw $95.70 in cap space. So they couldn't, like, maybe Pollard goes for more than that in the auction. If so, I guess let someone else.
I've got less than that in my bank account.
I get, and to be fair, Jacob does have the leverage. I'm pretty sure he's the defending champ. So, like he can still hold that against everyone else. But yeah, I think I would let Pollard walk because the truth is he doesn't have Tua under contract. So we talk about this deep quarterback room is the reason we have him high. But if he suddenly lets Tua walk and he's only got Deshaun Watson and Dak Prescott, we might view it in a different light. So I would say, especially if it's choosing between Pollard or Tua, I'll extend the third quarterback and then worry about the running back in free agency is how I would go about it. So if that's what Pollard's demands are at $115 per year, I think I'm just going to let him walk.
Yeah, fair point.
And then, especially, whether Bijan's there or not, you could still probably supplement Bijan on this team. And to Eric's point, I think the team with the other 2 early firsts so desperately needs a quarterback that if they end up with the 101, there may be a trade to cheaply move up with one of those picks to get the 101 fairly cheap and, still holding the other one perhaps. So
fair point. Real quick, we're going to pick some dark horse teams here, some teams that weren't ranked as high that we think could potentially compete. And we'll just go around the clockwise here. So, Brian, why don't you give us yours first here?
Yeah, just gonna a couple ones that I was higher on. It seems than everybody else. That Team Berticle. I'm writing my Bertil-C. I don't know. And Nuke Skywalker.
Yeah, good choices.
Richardson or Stroud?
Eric, what you got for your dark horse?
I don't want to contend with Brian on pronunciation, but I think that's Team Birdie Ice, and that's also my dark horse team. For me, the biggest gap in this team is at the running back position, and with your 2 early firsts and 3-4 seconds this year, I think you've got a pretty good shot at bolstering that part of your roster. I'm a sucker for whoever has the longest draft pick part of this spreadsheet, and that's this team. I mean, you got a lot of different ways you can shape this roster up. So that would be
my apologies. I didn't realize that was a capital I and not a lowercase L. My apologies, Birdie Ice. Sorry about that.
All right, Kyle, what you got for your dark horse?
Well, I just really wanted to say this name. Thou Shenault Pass. We all ranked him consensus 7, right? So technically outside the playoff range, right? But again, it was takeover, not necessarily who we think will win. But I still think that counts as a dark horse. Brian mentioned earlier, he's got my RB1 in Dynasty and Kenneth Walker. Any team with the RB1 should do well, right?
Yeah, good call. Shane, what you got?
I'm going to follow Kyle's suit. Thou shalt pass.
Great choice.
This team is loaded with a bunch of my favorite players just in general. So and because Jeff didn't let me talk about any of my favorite teams, he made me pick all the ones I was lower on. I had them ranked 4, which was the highest.
You had them ranked 4 because you cheated off my paper, Shane.
You had them like 10. Shut up.
5. Come on.
5.
Right, everyone
10,
else clear out. Me and
1
Shane are going to play like the grumpy old dudes from the Muppets in the post show.
So my dark horse team, I don't know, I consider this a dark horse team because we did have them consensus the 3rd overall team, but I had them at 5. And this is more of like an apology because looking back at the team, I should have had a much higher. And that is the 12th man with Patrick Mahomes and, some pieces that we talked about that Brian mentioned. I kind of opened my eyes a little bit like, man, what was I looking at when I looked at this team? So I should have had them much higher than 5. I was the lowest on them. So they are kind of my dark horse team from my rankings, not based on our rankings overall.
Well, as someone who also ranked them 5, I'm standing by that with that Mahomes contract. I just love the contracts of the other teams too. So give yourself some credit there, Jeff. But the champion Jacob does deserve his question answered, right? Richardson or Stroud?
Stroud.
I know where Brian's going.
Unquestionably Richardson for fantasy. There is no other answer. Go watch my video about it.
Yeah, Brian is all about Richardson.
On the Going for 2 Live network, right?
Absolutely.
Which is, everyone's here already. Check out the channel, guys.
I think I'm on Richardson's side as well. Just looking at Justin Fields this year, he barely passed the ball, and he was a QB6 because he ran the ball a ton. And I think that's what Richardson's going to do wherever he goes. So in fantasy, Richardson. If I was an NFL GM, I'm taking Stroud.
You see, and I'm gonna say Stroud because look at what Trevor Lawrence is doing, right? Like if Richardson is Fields, Stroud is considered like Lawrence, like those archetypes. Lawrence is producing almost as much as Fields this year. And yeah, it'll take that. You need the touchdowns. I think Stroud's an accurate enough passer that he's still my QB1 in the draft. Like, because I love the rushing upside, but at a certain point, if I think a quarterback is good enough to potentially be a 40 touchdown passer at some point in his career, that's a ton of upside too. So I like Stroud.
So me and Brian are Richardson. I think Kyle and Shane, you yelled out Stroud. So I'm assuming you're Stroud. Eric, you're the tiebreaker.
Yes.
I get to break a tie. Can I say like Hendon Hooker or something? It's not the correct answer. Please. This is not real financial advice. I'm used to being the most bullish on Richardson in a room. It's interesting to have that not be the case. Practically speaking, though, I mean, Stroud is so much. He's got such a clearer projection in terms of what he's going to do at this level. I do think that they are both elite options. I've actually got them both in that top tier. I think the tiebreaker for me is Stroud can move a little bit too. They didn't really call on him to do that much at Ohio State. There was a game they played, I think, against Northwestern in a monsoon where he did a lot more with his legs. So he potentially has maybe not, the same rushing upside as Richardson, but he can still gouge you with his feet and is obviously a very accurate passer overall.
Good stuff.
But so Shane, you said you have Young as your QB1 though.
Mm-hmm.
All right. 100%. See, I'm still with Stroud ahead of Young, but yeah.
Yeah, I think those three right there, it's really gonna.
Hey! They didn't pay for rookie draft advice. Let's come on, let's go.
But we do appreciate them paying for a PLP. And I will say, just to Jason's earlier comment, he appreciates my attempt to understand the Crazy League, and I frankly appreciate Crazy League rules. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, everyone, because this was fun.
Kyle is our resident Crazy League expert. He loves these leagues. That's why I definitely was happy to have him on this one.
It's funny how you went league expert. I wasn't sure how you're going to say he's our resident crazy person, but
I could have just stopped right there.
That's
our resident crazy Canadian.
I have that handled, Kyle.
Oh, true. Yeah.
All right, fellas, that wraps the podcast up. I want to thank all of you all that are in the chat for joining us and chiming in. This is a lot of fun. We've done this, for a couple years now, and this is the first year we've gone live. We did a live one earlier this year that the team and the group did not unfortunately make it to the chat, but I'm glad all y'all or most of y'all did. So we got to see some instant reactions to our analysis. So appreciate that. And as I always say, we hope to see you again next year because we've done a couple of these teams or leagues a couple of years in a row, and we get to see kind of how they grow. So thank you for your purchase, and we hope to see you again next year. For Brian, for Eric, for Shane, for Kyle, I'm Jeff, and hopefully we'll see you next year.